Welcome to One Book, One Coffee, the cozy corner of the internet where we delve deep into the stories that shape us, one cup at a time. Today, you're joining the ranks of the curious, the seekers, those who aren't content with the scroll or the binge. You're here for something more substantial, more fulfilling, and that's a testament to your character. You could be anywhere else, but you've chosen to invest in yourself, to learn and grow with a classic. The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway is not just a book. It's a profound journey into the human spirit, resilience, and the sea's timeless challenge. This novella has captivated readers worldwide, including high praise from luminaries like Barack Obama, who noted its profound simplicity and depth. Hemingway, a Nobel and Pulitzer Prize-winning author, wrote this masterpiece against the backdrop of his own struggles with aging and the relentless pursuit of personal excellence. His experiences in Cuba and his love for fishing deeply informed the narrative, making it authentic and poignant. Now, a quick note before we dive in. This is a detailed chapter-by-chapter walkthrough, so it's going to be a longer session. Take your time with it. There's no rush. If you need to step away, save this video to your watch later or forward the link to yourself on WhatsApp so you can pick up right where you left off. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's walk through this book together, chapter by chapter, idea by idea. Let's begin. A timeless tale of struggle and triumph. Ernest Hemingway was a literary giant whose experiences as a war correspondent, fisherman, and expatriate deeply influenced his writing. The Old Man and the Sea reflects his own battles with aging and his enduring quest for personal achievement. Picture this. You're sitting in a weathered wooden chair on a Cuban dock at dawn, steam rising from your coffee cup as the first light touches the water. The harbor is stirring to life, boats creaking against their moorings, and there's this old man preparing his skiff with movements so practiced they're almost ceremonial. This is Santiago, and his story begins not with triumph, but with what most of us would consider crushing defeat. When Hemingway introduces us to Santiago, he doesn't sugarcoat the reality. This fisherman hasn't caught a fish in 84 days. 84 days. Think about that for a moment. In our modern world of instant gratification and next-day delivery, we get frustrated when our coffee takes more than 5 minutes to brew. But here's a man who's been showing up to work every single day for nearly 3 months with nothing to show for it, except empty nets and the whispers of other fishermen calling him Salau, the worst kind of unlucky. Yet here's what's fascinating about Santiago, and what makes him so relevant to our modern struggles. He refuses to let circumstances define his identity. We live in an age where we're constantly measuring ourselves against metrics, social media likes, quarterly performance reviews, bank account balances. Santiago's been failing by every external measure for months, but he knows something profound that we often forget in our achievement-obsessed culture. Your worth isn't determined by your latest results. The old man's hands tell the story of decades spent wrestling with rope and line. They're scarred and weathered, marked by countless battles with fish that got away and fish that didn't. These aren't the soft hands of someone who's given up. They're the hands of someone who understands that mastery isn't about avoiding failure. It's about showing up despite it. Every callus, every scar is evidence of engagement with life, of refusing to retreat into comfort when things get difficult. Now think about this. In a world where we're constantly told to pivot when things aren't working, to find our passion and make it effortless, Santiago represents something almost countercultural. He's not passionate about fishing in the way we might think of passion as some burning romantic obsession. Instead, his relationship with the sea is deeper than passion. It's devotion. It's the kind of commitment that doesn't waver when the going gets tough, because it's not dependent on immediate rewards or external validation. What strikes me most about Santiago's character is how he embodies what we might call professional dignity. He treats his craft with reverence, even when that craft seems to be abandoning him. Every morning, he prepares his equipment with the same care he showed during his successful years. He doesn't cut corners or phone it in just because recent results have been disappointing. This is the mindset of someone who understands that excellence is a practice, not a destination. Consider how this applies to our own lives. Whether you're a teacher facing a difficult class, an entrepreneur whose startup isn't gaining traction, or an artist whose work isn't getting recognition, Santiago's example offers a different way of thinking about persistence. He's not grinding through misery, hoping for a breakthrough. He's fully present to his craft, engaged with each day's work as if it matters because it does, regardless of the outcome. The other fishermen see Santiago's streak of bad luck and begin to avoid him, as if failure might be contagious. But the old man doesn't internalize their judgment. He knows something they've forgotten in their pursuit of easy catches, that the sea doesn't owe him anything, and that his job isn't to control outcomes but to show up with skill, preparation, and respect for the work itself. This is wisdom that translates directly to our modern professional lives, where we're often judged by metrics that may not reflect the quality of our effort or the value of our contribution. There's something almost meditative about how Santiago approaches each day. He doesn't wake up bitter about yesterday's empty nets or anxious about tomorrow's uncertain prospects. He's fully present to the ritual of preparation, checking his lines, organizing his tackle, studying the water and weather conditions. This presence, this full engagement with the process rather than obsession with results, is perhaps one of the most valuable lessons we can draw from his character. What makes Santiago's story so compelling is that Hemingway doesn't present him as a saint or a superhero. He's a regular man dealing with very human concerns: poverty, loneliness, the fear of being seen as washed up. But within these ordinary struggles, he maintains an extraordinary dignity and commitment to excellence that transforms his daily work into something approaching art. As we delve deeper into Santiago's journey, we'll see how this foundation of character, this bedrock of professional integrity and quiet determination, sets the stage for one of literature's most profound meditations on what it means to strive, to struggle, and to find meaning in the very act of not giving up. His story reminds us that sometimes the most heroic thing we can do is simply show up tomorrow and cast our lines again, regardless of what today brought us. Picture this. You're sitting in your favorite coffee shop, watching an elderly man at the corner table sharing stories with a young person who hangs on every word. There's something magical about that dynamic, isn't there? That's exactly what we discover in one of literature's most beautiful relationships when we explore the bond between Santiago, our weathered Cuban fisherman, and Marlin, the boy who refuses to abandon him despite everything the world tells him to do. When Hemingway introduces us to this unlikely pair, he's painting a portrait that goes far deeper than just an old man and his fishing apprentice. Think about the relationships that have shaped your own life. Haven't some of the most meaningful connections been with people decades older or younger than you? Santiago and Marlin represent something we're losing in our fast-paced, age-segregated modern world. The profound wisdom that flows between generations when we actually take time to listen to each other. The boy Marlin isn't just Santiago's helper, he's his lifeline to hope itself. For 84 days, Santiago has returned empty-handed from the sea, and the other fishermen whisper that he's cursed, that his luck has run dry like an old well. The boy's parents, being practical people, have forbidden their son from fishing with the unlucky old man. They've moved Marlin to another boat, one that actually catches fish and puts food on the table. You can understand their reasoning, can't you? In our achievement-obsessed culture, we make similar calculations every day. We steer our children away from the struggling teacher, the failing business, the mentor who's hit a rough patch. But here's where the story becomes extraordinary. Marlin chooses loyalty over logic. Despite his parents' orders, despite the village's judgment, despite the evidence of Santiago's failing luck, the boy continues to care for the old man. He brings him food when Santiago has none, discusses baseball with the passion only true friends share, and dreams of the day they'll fish together again. Now, think about this. When was the last time you witnessed such unwavering faith in another person? In our world of conditional relationships and performance-based love, Manilin's devotion feels almost radical. What makes their bond so compelling is how it defies the typical mentor-student dynamic. Yes, Santiago has taught the boy everything about fishing, about reading the sea's moods and understanding the fish's patterns. But Manilin gives Santiago something equally valuable, the gift of being needed, of mattering to someone. The old man may be failing at his craft, but he succeeds completely at being worthy of love. There's profound wisdom here for anyone who's ever felt their value diminish with their productivity. Their conversations reveal the depth of their connection. They talk about baseball with the reverence others reserve for religion, particularly about the great DiMaggio, whose father was also a fisherman. These aren't empty discussions about sports statistics. They're a shared language of hope and excellence. When Santiago speaks of DiMaggio playing despite the pain of a bone spur in his heel, he's really talking about persistence in the face of suffering. The boy understands this completely. Their baseball talk becomes a metaphor for their own situation. Two people believing in greatness even when the scoreboard suggests otherwise. Consider how this reflects our modern relationships. How often do we connect with others through shared passions that outsiders might consider trivial? Think about the colleague who becomes a friend through your mutual obsession with a TV show, or the neighbor you bond with over gardening techniques. Santiago and Manilin's baseball discussions remind us that intimacy often grows from these seemingly small shared enthusiasms. The boy's determination to return to fishing with Santiago, despite everyone's disapproval, speaks to something we desperately need in today's world: the courage to invest in people rather than just outcomes. Manilin sees beyond Santiago's recent failures to the master fisherman within. He remembers the great catches, the wisdom shared, the skills learned. In our disposable culture, where we're quick to write off anyone going through a difficult season, Manilin's loyalty feels revolutionary. What's particularly moving is how their relationship sustains them both through different kinds of poverty. Santiago lacks fish and food, while Manilin lacks the freedom to choose his own path. Yet together, they create a wealth of connection that transcends material circumstances. They dream together of better days, of future fishing trips, of the lions Santiago once saw on the beaches of Africa. These shared dreams become more real and nourishing than the harsh realities surrounding them. The beauty of their bond lies in its mutuality. Santiago doesn't just take from the boy's youth and energy. He offers something irreplaceable in return: the dignity of being treated as an equal, the respect of being listened to, the joy of sharing hard-won wisdom. Manilin isn't just helping an old man. He's participating in something timeless, learning not just about fishing but about faithfulness, resilience, and the kind of love that persists through failure. As we move deeper into Santiago's story, remember this relationship. It's the emotional anchor that makes everything else possible. Without Manilin's unwavering belief, Santiago's epic struggle with the great fish would be merely tragic rather than heroic. The boy's faith transforms an old man's desperation into dignity, his failure into a kind of triumph that has nothing to do with catching fish, and everything to do with the nobility of human connection. Picture yourself settling into your favorite chair with a steaming cup of coffee, and let me tell you about one of literature's most profound relationships, the bond between an old fisherman and the sea that defines his entire existence. In Hemingway's masterpiece, the sea isn't just a backdrop or a pretty setting for Santiago's story. No, it's a living, breathing character that pulses with mystery, danger, and an almost maternal tenderness that will make you rethink every relationship you've ever had with the natural world. When Santiago looks out at the waters off Cuba, he doesn't see what most of us might see: an endless expanse of blue, maybe some waves, perhaps a few seagulls. He sees something far more complex and intimate. To him, the sea is la mar, feminine in Spanish, and he thinks of her as a woman who gives or withholds great favors. Now, think about this for a moment. How often do we personalize the forces that shape our lives? Santiago's relationship with the sea mirrors our own relationships with the unpredictable elements in our world, whether that's the economy, technology, or even our own careers. The sea in Hemingway's vision operates on multiple levels simultaneously, much like a complex symphony playing different melodies at once. She's the provider, offering fish that sustain Santiago's meager livelihood, yet she's also the withholder, keeping her bounty just beyond his reach for 84 straight days. Imagine going to work every single day for nearly 3 months and coming home empty-handed. That's the reality Santiago faces, yet he never curses the sea. Instead, he maintains this profound respect, this understanding that the sea operates by rules far grander than human impatience or need. What's fascinating is how Hemingway presents the sea as both ancient and timeless, yet constantly changing. The waters Santiago navigates have been there for millennia, witnessing countless human dramas, yet each day brings new currents, new weather patterns, new mysteries beneath the surface. This duality speaks to something we all experience in our modern lives, the tension between permanence and change. Think about your own industry or field of work. The fundamental principles might remain constant, like the sea itself, but the daily challenges, the surface conditions, they're always shifting, demanding adaptation and respect. The sea also serves as Santiago's greatest teacher, though she's not always a gentle instructor. She teaches patience through long, fishless days that would break a lesser spirit. She teaches humility by reminding Santiago again and again that he's just one small being in a vast ecosystem. But perhaps most importantly, she teaches the delicate balance between taking and giving back. Santiago never takes more than he needs, and when he does take, he does so with reverence and gratitude. How different might our relationship with natural resources look today if we approached them with Santiago's mindset? There's something almost mystical about how the sea communicates with Santiago. He reads her moods in the color of the water, in the behavior of the birds, in the way the wind carries certain scents. This isn't superstition. It's deep ecological knowledge passed down through generations of fishermen. In our data-driven world, we might dismiss such intuitive understanding, but Santiago's ability to read the sea's subtle signals often means the difference between success and failure, between life and death. The sea's dual nature becomes most apparent during Santiago's epic battle with the great Marlin. She provides the stage for this magnificent struggle, supporting both hunter and hunted in a dance that's both beautiful and brutal. The sea doesn't take sides. She simply is, holding space for this ancient drama to unfold. This neutrality, this refusal to judge or intervene, mirrors the way life often presents us with challenges. The universe doesn't necessarily want us to succeed or fail. It simply provides the arena where our character gets tested and revealed. What makes Santiago's relationship with the sea so compelling is his refusal to see her as an enemy, even when she seems to work against him. When the sharks come to destroy his prize Marlin, they're not evil forces. They're simply part of the sea's ecosystem, following their nature just as Santiago follows his. This acceptance, this ability to find meaning and even beauty in struggle and loss, offers us a profound lesson about resilience in our own lives. How often do we rage against circumstances beyond our control, instead of accepting them as part of a larger pattern we might not fully understand? The sea also represents the ultimate frontier, the place where human ambition meets natural law. Santiago ventures far beyond where other fishermen dare to go, into the deep waters where the biggest fish live, but also where the greatest dangers lurk. This willingness to push beyond comfortable boundaries, to risk everything for the possibility of something extraordinary, resonates deeply with anyone who's ever pursued a dream that others called impossible. As we close this exploration of the sea's role in Santiago's story, consider how Hemingway uses this vast, mysterious setting to reflect the grandest themes of human existence: our relationship with nature, our capacity for endurance, our need for meaning in the face of apparent indifference. The sea becomes a mirror in which we see not just Santiago's character, but our own deepest struggles and aspirations reflected back at us, as eternal and ever-changing as the tides themselves. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite cup of coffee, steam rising between us, and I'm about to tell you about one of the most extraordinary battles ever put to paper. Not a battle with swords or guns, but something far more primal and profound. Santiago, our weathered Cuban fisherman, has just hooked the fish of a lifetime, and what follows is nothing short of a masterclass in human determination. Now think about this for a moment. When was the last time you truly committed to something, knowing full well it might break you? Santiago's battle with the giant Marlin isn't just about fishing. It's about that moment when we decide to go all in, consequences be damned. The old man feels the fish take his bait, and immediately he knows this isn't just any catch. This is the one that could change everything, or destroy him in the process. Hemingway paints this scene with such visceral detail that you can almost feel the line cutting into Santiago's weathered hands. The Marlin is massive, easily 18 feet long, and it begins what can only be described as an underwater marathon. The fish doesn't panic or thrash wildly like smaller catches. Instead, it swims steadily northwest, pulling the small skiff and the old man into the vast expanse of the Gulf Stream. There's something almost respectful in this initial dance between predator and prey, though you might wonder who exactly is hunting whom. Here's where Hemingway's genius really shines through. This isn't just a fishing story, it's a meditation on what it means to truly engage with life. Santiago could cut the line. Any reasonable person might suggest he should. The fish is clearly too big for his small boat, too strong for an aging fisherman. But Santiago understands something that our modern world often forgets. Sometimes the value isn't in the winning, but in the quality of the fight itself. As hours pass, Santiago's hands begin to cramp and bleed from the constant pressure of the line. The sun beats down mercilessly, and his water runs low. Think about the last time you pushed through genuine discomfort for something you believed in. Maybe it was training for a marathon, working late nights to build your business, or caring for a sick family member. Santiago's physical suffering becomes a metaphor for all those moments when we choose the difficult path because it's the right one. What's fascinating is how Hemingway shows us Santiago's relationship with the Marlin evolving throughout their struggle. Initially, there's the hunter's excitement, the fisherman's pride. But as the battle stretches into its second day, something deeper emerges. Santiago begins speaking to the fish, not as an adversary but almost as a worthy opponent, even a brother. He admires the Marlin's strength, its nobility, its refusal to give up. In our hyper-competitive world, when do we ever pause to respect our competition this way? The old man's internal monologue during this epic struggle reveals layers of wisdom that feel remarkably relevant today. He thinks about baseball, about the great Joe DiMaggio playing through pain. He remembers his own youth, when he arm-wrestled the strongest man in Casablanca for 24 hours straight. These aren't just nostalgic wanderings, they're Santiago drawing on every reserve of mental strength he possesses. How often do we tap into our own reservoir of past victories when facing current challenges? But here's what makes this battle truly extraordinary. Santiago never sees it as man versus nature. He sees himself as part of nature, engaged in an ancient dance that has been playing out for millennia. The fish isn't his enemy. It's his teacher, his test, his mirror. When Santiago finally begins to gain ground on the Marlin, bringing it closer to the boat in wide, exhausting circles, there's no triumph in his voice, only a kind of reverent determination. The moment when Santiago finally brings the Marlin alongside his boat is breathtaking in its simplicity and power. The fish is indeed magnificent, larger than his boat, its sword-like bill and purple stripes gleaming in the sunlight. Santiago drives his harpoon home with the last of his strength, and the great fish dies with a dignity that matches the struggle it has given. There's something profoundly moving about this moment. Something that speaks to our deepest understanding of respect between worthy adversaries. Now you might be thinking, what does this have to do with my life? I don't fish. I don't face giant marlins in the middle of the ocean. But consider this. Every one of us has our own marlin. Maybe it's the novel you've been trying to write for years, the relationship you're working to heal, the fear you're determined to overcome. Santiago's battle teaches us that the size of the challenge isn't what matters, it's the quality of our engagement with it. The old man's victory is complete, but Hemingway being Hemingway, he knows that life's greatest lessons often come wrapped in complexity. Santiago has won his battle, but his journey is far from over. As he lashes the marlin to his boat and begins the long journey home, we're about to discover that sometimes winning the battle is just the beginning of an even greater test. The sharks are coming, and they're going to teach Santiago and us something profound about the nature of triumph and loss. Picture yourself sitting alone at dawn, watching the sun rise over an empty ocean. That's where we find ourselves in Hemingway's masterpiece, exploring one of its most profound and universal themes, isolation. Now, grab your coffee a little tighter, because we're about to dive into something that touches every single one of us, whether we admit it or not. Santiago, our weathered fisherman, hasn't caught a fish in 84 days. Think about that for a moment. 84 days of coming home empty-handed, of facing the disappointed looks, of questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself. But here's what's fascinating about Hemingway's portrayal of isolation. It's not just about being alone physically. Santiago is surrounded by an entire fishing village, yet he might as well be on Mars. The other fishermen avoid him like he's cursed. Parents warn their children away from his boat. Even Marlin, the boy who loves him, is forbidden by his parents from fishing with the unlucky old man. Sound familiar? In our hyper-connected world, we're more isolated than ever. You can have 5,000 followers on social media and still feel like Santiago, watching everyone else succeed while you struggle in silence. The old man's isolation isn't just geographical, it's psychological, emotional, and deeply spiritual. He's cut off from his community, from success, from the very thing that defines him as a man. But here's where Hemingway's genius really shines. Santiago's isolation becomes his crucible. When he finally hooks that magnificent marlin, he's utterly alone on the vast ocean. No GPS, no radio, no backup. Just him, his small boat, and a fish that could either redeem him or destroy him. Now think about this. How often do our most important battles happen in complete solitude? That moment when you're deciding whether to leave a toxic job, whether to forgive someone who hurt you, whether to take a risk that could change everything. These moments don't happen in committee meetings or group chats. They happen in the silence of your own heart. The old man talks to himself constantly throughout his ordeal. Some might call it madness, but I'd argue it's survival. He becomes his own companion, his own cheerleader, his own confessor. When he says, "I wish I had the boy," it's not just about needing help with the fish. It's about the fundamental human need for witness, for someone to acknowledge our struggle, to validate that our pain and effort matter. In our modern isolation, we've forgotten this art of self-companionship. We fill every quiet moment with podcasts, music, notifications, anything to avoid being alone with our thoughts. Santiago's relationship with the marlin becomes almost mystical in its intimacy. He calls the fish his brother, speaks to it with respect and love even as he's determined to kill it. This isn't just poetic license. It's Hemingway showing us how profound isolation can paradoxically lead to profound connection. When you strip away all the noise, all the distractions, all the social expectations, you can finally hear the deeper currents of life. The old man's isolation forces him into a relationship with something greater than himself, something wild and magnificent and true. Consider how this mirrors our own experiences with solitude. Some of the most transformative moments in human history happened in isolation. Jesus in the desert for 40 days, Buddha under the Bodhi tree, artists in their studios, writers in their garages at 3 in the morning. There's something about being stripped down to just yourself and your purpose that reveals who you really are beneath all the masks and roles you play for others. The cruel irony of Santiago's story is that his greatest triumph happens in complete solitude, witnessed only by the sea and the stars. When he finally brings in that enormous skeleton, the other fishermen measure it and marvel, but they missed the real story. They didn't see the epic battle, the moments of doubt, the conversations with his own soul, the way he pushed beyond what seemed humanly possible. This is the tragedy of modern isolation too. Our most important victories and defeats happen in private, while the world only sees the aftermath. But Hemingway doesn't paint isolation as purely negative. There's dignity in Santiago's solitary struggle, a kind of nobility that comes from facing your demons without an audience. The old man's isolation becomes a test of character that reveals his true nature. Stripped of community support, professional validation, and even basic comfort, what remains? What remains is essence, is spirit, is the irreducible core of what makes us human. In our age of constant connectivity, we've almost lost the ability to be truly alone with ourselves. We check our phones compulsively, afraid of silence, afraid of our own thoughts. Santiago's isolation reminds us that solitude isn't something to be feared, but something to be mastered. It's in those quiet moments, away from the crowd's judgment and expectations, that we discover our own strength, our own voice, our own truth. As we move forward in exploring this magnificent story, remember that Santiago's isolation isn't just about one old man and one fish. It's about the universal human experience of facing life's greatest challenges alone, of finding meaning in struggle, of discovering that sometimes the most profound connections happen when we're completely by ourselves. Picture this. You're settling into your favorite coffee spot, steam rising from your mug, and we're about to dive into one of literature's most powerful lessons about what it truly means to never give up. Today, we're exploring the heart of Hemingway's masterpiece, where an old fisherman named Santiago teaches us something profound about perseverance that goes far beyond catching fish. You know that moment when everything in your body is screaming at you to quit. Your muscles ache, your mind is foggy with exhaustion, and every rational thought tells you to throw in the towel. Santiago knows that feeling intimately. For 84 days, this weathered Cuban fisherman has returned to shore empty-handed, his boat as barren as his neighbor's faith in him. The younger fishermen mock him, calling him sallow, the worst kind of unlucky. But here's what makes Santiago extraordinary. He doesn't let their whispers define his reality. Think about the last time you faced a seemingly impossible challenge. Maybe it was starting a business that everyone said would fail, training for a marathon when you could barely run a mile, or learning a new skill that felt completely beyond your grasp. Santiago's story speaks directly to those moments because Hemingway understood something crucial about human nature. Our capacity to endure isn't measured by our physical strength, but by our willingness to continue when continuing seems pointless. When Santiago finally hooks the great Marlin, we witness perseverance in its rawest form. This isn't the motivational poster version of persistence. It's messy, painful, and brutally honest. His hands are cut and bleeding from the fishing line, cramping so badly he can barely maintain his grip. The sun beats down mercilessly, and dehydration clouds his thoughts. Yet Santiago doesn't just endure these hardships, he transforms them into a strange kind of communion with his struggle. Here's where Hemingway's genius shines through. Santiago talks to the fish, not as his enemy but as his brother. He says, "Fish, I love you and respect you very much, but I will kill you dead before this day ends." This isn't contradiction, it's the deepest truth about meaningful perseverance. The challenges that truly test us aren't obstacles to overcome, but partners in a dance that reveals who we really are. Consider how this applies to your own life. The entrepreneur who respects the market forces that threaten to destroy her startup while refusing to surrender to them. The student who acknowledges the difficulty of medical school while maintaining unwavering commitment to becoming a doctor. The artist who honors the craft's demands while pushing through years of rejection and criticism. Santiago shows us that real perseverance isn't about gritting your teeth and pushing through. It's about finding a way to love the struggle itself. Now think about this. What sustained Santiago through 3 days of battling this magnificent fish? It's not just stubbornness or pride, though both play their part. It's his deep connection to something larger than himself. He thinks of Joe DiMaggio playing through bone spurs, drawing strength from the baseball hero's legendary toughness. He remembers arm wrestling the great Negro from Cienfuegos for 24 hours straight, proving to himself that he has champion's blood flowing through his veins. This is where Santiago's perseverance becomes a masterclass for modern life. In our age of instant gratification and quick fixes, we've forgotten the power of drawing on our personal mythology. Santiago doesn't just remember these moments, he inhabits them, letting their strength flow into his present struggle. When was the last time you consciously connected with your own moments of triumph? When did you last remind yourself of the mountains you've already moved? The physical toll on Santiago is devastating. His back aches from hunching over the line, his left hand cramps into a useless claw, and his right hand is sliced raw. Blood attracts sharks that will eventually destroy his prize, but Santiago persists not because he's guaranteed victory, but because the act of persisting has become sacred to him. This is the paradox that Hemingway presents. Sometimes the greatest victories come wrapped in apparent defeat. Think about the modern parallels everywhere around us. The small business owner who keeps her doors open through economic downturns, not because she's guaranteed success, but because closing would mean abandoning something essential about herself. The teacher who continues pouring energy into struggling students, knowing that most may never appreciate the effort, but understanding that the teaching itself has value beyond measurable outcomes. Santiago's perseverance isn't heroic in the Hollywood sense. There's no swelling orchestra or triumphant speech. Instead, it's quiet, methodical, and deeply human. He talks to himself, to the fish, to his absent friend Marlin, creating a narrative that sustains him through the darkest hours. This is perhaps the most practical lesson we can extract. Perseverance isn't a solo act. Even when we're physically alone, we carry conversations, memories, and connections that fuel our determination. As we sit here with our coffee, considering Santiago's relentless spirit, we're reminded that true perseverance isn't about the outcome. It's about who we become in the process of refusing to quit. Santiago returns to shore with nothing but a skeleton, yet he's somehow more complete than when he left. That transformation, that deepening of character through sustained effort, is available to all of us, waiting in whatever challenge we're currently avoiding or struggling through. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite mug, steam rising between us, and I'm about to tell you about one of the most brutal yet beautiful battles ever written. We've been talking about Santiago, that weathered old fisherman, and how he finally hooked the fish of his dreams. But here's where Hemingway shows us something profound about life itself. Sometimes winning isn't about getting what you want. It's about how you handle what tries to take it away from you. The moment Santiago's Marlin dies, lashed to the side of his small skiff, the sea transforms from ally to adversary. It's as if nature itself decides to test whether this old man truly deserves his prize. The first shark appears like a dark prophecy cutting through the water, a mako shark, sleek and deadly, drawn by the scent of the marlin's blood. Now, think about this for a moment. Santiago has just achieved the greatest triumph of his fishing career, and immediately, the universe seems determined to strip it away from him piece by piece. This isn't just about fishing, my friend. This is about every moment in your life when you've finally gotten something you've worked for, only to watch external forces try to tear it down. Maybe it's the promotion you earned just before company layoffs hit. Maybe it's the relationship you nurtured that gets tested by unexpected circumstances. Maybe it's the small business you built that faces economic storms you never saw coming. Santiago's battle with the sharks becomes a mirror for every time we've had to defend what we've rightfully earned. Hemingway's genius lies in how he shows us Santiago's response. The old man doesn't rage against fate or curse his luck. Instead, he fights with whatever he has. When the first mako takes a massive chunk of his marlin, Santiago kills it with his harpoon but loses the harpoon in the process. He ties his knife to an oar. When more sharks come and he loses the knife, he breaks off the boat's tiller and uses that as a weapon. Each loss forces innovation. Each setback demands adaptation. There's something deeply moving about watching this old man refuse to surrender, even as the odds stack impossibly against him. It reminds me of those stories you hear about people who lose their homes in natural disasters, but immediately start planning how to rebuild. Or entrepreneurs who watch their first business fail, but use those lessons to create something stronger. Santiago embodies that particular kind of human resilience that doesn't just endure, it transforms. The sea, in Hemingway's hands, becomes more than just water and waves. It's the ultimate testing ground, indifferent to human hopes and dreams. The sharks aren't evil, they're simply following their nature, drawn by blood and opportunity. This is perhaps what makes their assault so terrifying and so realistic. We're not dealing with cartoon villains here, but with the natural consequences of success in a world that doesn't guarantee you get to keep what you earn. Think about how this mirrors our modern relationship with success and vulnerability. Every achievement we post on social media, every milestone we celebrate, makes us visible to forces that might want to diminish what we've accomplished. The sharks circling Santiago's boat are like the critics who emerge when you finally succeed, the market forces that challenge your business right when it starts thriving, or the personal setbacks that test your resolve just when life seems to be going your way. But here's what I find most remarkable about Santiago's ordeal. Even as the sharks systematically destroy his prize, taking chunk after chunk until only the skeleton remains, he never stops fighting. Not because he believes he can win by the middle of the shark attacks, he knows he's lost, but because fighting is who he is. The act of resistance becomes more important than the outcome. This speaks to something profound about human dignity. Santiago's worth isn't measured by whether he brings the whole Marlin back to shore. His worth is measured by how he conducts himself when everything goes wrong. When the Galanos, the scavenger sharks, arrive in the darkness to finish what the Mako started, Santiago fights them off with a broken tiller until his hands are raw and bleeding. He fights because surrender would mean abandoning not just his fish, but himself. There's a moment near the end of the shark attacks when Santiago apologizes to the Marlin, speaking to it as if to an old friend. He's sorry that the sharks have destroyed something so magnificent, sorry that his triumph has become the Marlin's desecration. This tender moment, embedded in all this violence and loss, shows us something essential about how we should face our own defeats with grace and dignity intact. The storm that follows, because of course there's a storm, becomes almost anticlimactic after the shark attacks. Santiago has already lost everything he set out to gain, yet he continues navigating toward home. The physical tempest mirrors the emotional and spiritual storm he's weathered, but by now he's proven to himself, and to us that external circumstances can't touch the essential core of who he is. As we transition to understanding what Santiago brings back to shore, and what that teaches us about the true nature of victory and defeat, remember this. Sometimes the most important battles we fight are the ones where the outcome is already decided, and what matters is how we choose to meet our fate. Picture this. You're sitting with Santiago on that weathered boat, watching him battle the greatest fish of his life for 3 days and nights, only to return to shore with nothing but a skeleton. Your first instinct might be to call this the ultimate defeat, right? But here's where Hemingway shows us something profound about the nature of victory and loss that completely reshapes how we think about success in our own lives. You know, when I first read this story years ago, I was frustrated. I wanted Santiago to win, to bring home that magnificent Marlin intact, to prove all the doubting villagers wrong. But that's exactly the point where Hemingway challenges our most basic assumptions about what winning actually means. Think about it this way. Santiago loses the fish, but does he really lose? Or does he discover something far more valuable than any prize he could have brought to market? The genius of this tale lies in how it forces us to examine our own definitions of success and failure. We live in a world obsessed with measurable outcomes, don't we? We count likes, followers, dollars, promotions, test scores. We've been conditioned to believe that if you can't show tangible results, you haven't really won. But Santiago's journey suggests something radically different. His victory isn't in the fish he brings home, it's in the man he becomes through the struggle itself. Consider what actually happens during those 3 days at sea. Santiago pushes his aging body beyond its limits, maintains unwavering focus despite exhaustion and pain, shows respect and even love for his worthy opponent, and never gives up even when the odds turn impossible. Now, think about this. Aren't these the very qualities we most admire in human beings? Isn't this exactly the kind of person we hope to become when life tests us? The old fisherman teaches us that there are victories that can't be measured on any scale. When he finally hooks the marlin, he doesn't just see a prize to be won. He recognizes a noble adversary, a creature as determined and dignified as himself. He speaks to the fish with respect, almost with affection. This isn't about domination, it's about engagement with life at its most intense level. How often do we approach our own challenges with this kind of reverence and respect? Here's where it gets really interesting for those of us navigating modern life. Think about the entrepreneur who builds a company for 10 years, pours everything into it, only to watch it fail in the final stretch. By conventional standards, that's defeat. But what if, like Santiago, they discovered reserves of strength they never knew they had? What if they learned to lead with grace under pressure, to make impossible decisions with wisdom, to treat competitors with respect rather than hatred? What if the real victory was becoming the kind of person who could handle that level of responsibility and loss with dignity? The sharks that strip Santiago's prize represent something we all face. The forces that try to diminish our achievements, the critics who minimize our efforts, the circumstances beyond our control that threaten to rob us of what we've worked so hard to gain. But notice what happens when Santiago fights them off. He doesn't just defend his fish. He defends his right to have engaged in the struggle at all. He refuses to let external forces define the meaning of his journey. This resonates powerfully in our age of social media and instant judgment, doesn't it? How many times have you accomplished something meaningful, only to have others focus on what you didn't achieve or what went wrong? Santiago shows us that the value of our efforts isn't determined by public opinion or even by visible results. It's determined by the integrity with which we engage the challenge and the growth we experience through the process. The relationship between Santiago and the boy Marlin adds another layer to this exploration of victory and defeat. The boy sees what others miss. While the village focuses on Santiago's streak of bad luck, Marlin recognizes the old man's undiminished spirit and skill. This reminds us that true victory often requires the right kind of witness, people who understand that success isn't always obvious or immediate. Now think about this. In your own life, who are your witnesses? Who sees your real victories, not just your public successes? And equally important, whose struggles do you witness with the kind of understanding that Marlin shows Santiago? Sometimes being that kind of witness for others is its own form of victory. The beauty of Hemingway's vision is that it doesn't diminish the pain of loss or pretend that defeat doesn't matter. Santiago is genuinely heartbroken when he sees what remains of his magnificent fish. The loss is real, the disappointment authentic. But alongside that loss lives something indestructible. The knowledge that he was worthy of the challenge, that he gave everything he had, that he conducted himself with honor throughout the ordeal. As we wrap up this exploration of victory and defeat, consider carrying Santiago's wisdom into your own battles. The next time you face a challenge that seems impossible, remember that the real question isn't whether you'll win or lose in conventional terms. The question is whether you'll engage fully, fight with honor, respect your opponents, and discover what you're truly capable of becoming. Because in the end, that might be the only victory that really matters, the only one that can never be taken away by sharks or circumstances or the judgment of others. That's the kind of triumph that transforms an old fisherman's apparent defeat into one of literature's most profound victories. So we've been talking about Santiago's incredible journey out on those endless waters, and now I want to dive into something that really struck me about this old fisherman, something that might make you pause and think about your own life. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite mug of coffee, and I'm about to tell you about one of the most fascinating psychological battles ever put to paper. It's the war between pride and humility that rages inside Santiago's weathered heart. And honestly, it's a battle we all know intimately, even if we don't always admit it. Now, think about this for a moment. When was the last time you felt that burning sensation of pride, that fierce determination to prove yourself, maybe even to prove yourself wrong about your own limitations? Santiago carries this fire within him, this almost defiant pride that refuses to let him accept defeat. He's gone 84 days without catching a fish, and the other fishermen are starting to whisper. Some call him unlucky, others just shake their heads with that knowing look we've all seen, the look that says someone's glory days are behind them. But here's where it gets fascinating. Santiago's pride isn't the shallow, boastful kind that we see plastered all over social media today. It's deeper, more complex, almost spiritual in nature. Hemingway shows us a man who takes genuine pride in his craft, in the knowledge passed down through generations of fishermen. Santiago knows the sea like a pianist knows their favorite piece, every nuance, every subtle change in rhythm and mood. When he talks about the fish, about reading the water and understanding the wind patterns, there's this quiet confidence that comes not from arrogance, but from decades of respectful observation. It's the kind of pride a master craftsman feels when they run their hands over a piece of perfectly sanded wood, or the pride a grandmother feels when she watches her bread rise just right in the oven. But here's where the story gets really interesting, and where I think we can all learn something profound. Santiago's pride is constantly checked by his humility, and this creates this beautiful, almost musical tension throughout the entire narrative. Think about when he's out there on the boat, talking to the fish he's trying to catch. He doesn't see himself as superior to these creatures, quite the opposite actually. He calls them his brothers, he respects their strength and their will to survive. There's this moment where he's battling the great Marlin, and instead of cursing it or treating it as merely something to be conquered, he actually admires its nobility. Can you imagine that? In the middle of this epic struggle, this old man finds time to appreciate the dignity of his opponent. This reminds me of something I noticed about truly successful people in today's world, the ones who last, who build something meaningful rather than just chasing quick wins. They all seem to have this same balance. Take someone like a seasoned surgeon, for instance. They need enough pride to trust their hands when someone's life is literally in their grasp, but they also need the humility to keep learning, to admit when they don't know something, to respect the complexity of the human body they're working on. It's that same dance Santiago performs every day on the water. What really gets to me about Santiago's character is how his pride never diminishes his capacity for wonder. Even after all those years on the sea, even with all his knowledge and experience, he still approaches each day with this sense of curiosity and respect for forces greater than himself. When he looks up at the stars, or feels the power of the Gulf Stream beneath his small boat, there's this recognition that he's just one small part of something vast and mysterious. It's humbling, but it doesn't crush his spirit. Instead, it seems to fuel his determination to do his part well, to honor his role in this grand story. Now think about how different this is from the kind of pride we often see celebrated today. We live in a world of highlight reels and personal brands, where pride often manifests as this need to appear invincible, to never show weakness or uncertainty. But Santiago shows us another way. His pride coexists beautifully with vulnerability. He admits when he's tired, when his hands hurt, when he feels the weight of his years. He doesn't pretend to be something he's not. yet he never gives up on being the best version of what he is. This balance between pride and humility becomes even more poignant when you consider Santiago's relationship with the boy, Marlin. Here's this old man who could easily become bitter about being seen as unlucky, who could let his pride prevent him from accepting help or kindness. Instead, he maintains this gentle dignity in his interactions, teaching what he can while remaining open to the simple joy of human connection. It's like watching someone who has learned that true strength doesn't require you to carry everything alone. As we move forward in exploring Santiago's journey, keep this tension in mind, this beautiful, complex relationship between knowing your worth and knowing your place in the larger scheme of things. Because ultimately, I think Hemingway is showing us that the greatest victories come not from conquering others, but from finding that perfect balance within ourselves, that sweet spot where confidence meets reverence, where determination dances with acceptance. You know, there's something absolutely magical about the way Hemingway weaves dreams throughout Santiago's story, and I want to take a moment to sit with one of the most powerful symbols in the entire novella. Picture this: an old fisherman, weathered by decades of salt and sun, lying on his simple cot, and what does he dream about? Not the fish that got away, not the fortune he never made, but lions. Lions playing on the beaches of Africa from his youth. Now, think about this for a moment. When was the last time you had a recurring dream that felt more real than your waking life? Santiago dreams of these lions almost every night, and Hemingway mentions this dream at least 5 times throughout the story. This isn't just literary decoration, my friends. These lions represent something profound about the human spirit, about the eternal flame that burns inside us regardless of our physical limitations. The lions first appear in Santiago's dreams as memories from his time as a young sailor along the African coast. He remembers watching them play on the white beaches, their golden bodies moving with effortless power and grace. But here's what's beautiful about this imagery. These aren't the lions of conquest or aggression that we might expect in a story about struggle. These are lions at play, lions in their natural state of joy and vitality. They represent the pure essence of strength before it becomes corrupted by the need to prove itself. Consider how this connects to our modern lives. We live in a world obsessed with youth, don't we? We spend billions on anti-aging creams, gym memberships, and procedures to recapture what we think we've lost. But Santiago's lions suggest something different entirely. They suggest that true strength, true youth, isn't about our physical bodies at all. It's about maintaining that inner fire, that sense of wonder and possibility that we had when we were young. Think about someone you know who radiates energy despite their age. Maybe it's a grandparent who still tells stories with sparkling eyes, or a mentor who approaches each day with curiosity. These people have their own version of Santiago's lions. They've found a way to keep that essential vitality alive, even as their bodies change and time passes. The timing of when Santiago dreams of the lions is equally significant. Hemingway strategically places these dreams at moments when Santiago needs them most. Before his great journey, during his struggle with the Marlin, and especially when he's facing his darkest moments of doubt. The lions come to him like old friends, reminding him of who he truly is beneath the layers of failure and disappointment. There's a beautiful parallel here to how we use our own memories of strength and joy. When you're facing a difficult challenge, don't you sometimes reach back to moments when you felt truly alive and capable? Maybe it's remembering the confidence you felt when you nailed that presentation, or the sense of adventure from a solo trip you took years ago. These memories become our lions, our source of renewable strength. What's particularly moving about Santiago's lions is that they represent a very specific kind of strength. Not the brute force of domination, but the natural power of beings living in harmony with their environment. The lions aren't hunting in his dreams. They're playing, existing in a state of pure being. This speaks to a deeper truth about resilience. The strongest people aren't those who never fall down. They're those who maintain their essential joy and curiosity despite life's inevitable challenges. Now, think about this in terms of how we often misunderstand aging and experience in our culture. We tend to see getting older as a process of loss, of diminishing returns. But Santiago's lines suggest the opposite. They imply that our experiences, our accumulated wisdom, our battle scars, can actually connect us more deeply to our essential strength. The old man dreams of lions not because he's trying to escape his reality, but because he's accessing the deepest truth about who he is. There's also something profound about the setting of these dreams. The lions aren't in a zoo or a circus. They're on African beaches, wild and free. This speaks to the importance of maintaining our connection to our authentic selves, to the parts of us that haven't been tamed by society's expectations or our own self-imposed limitations. In our hyper-connected, always-on world, we need our own African beaches, our own spaces where we can remember who we are when nobody's watching. The lions also represent hope in its purest form. They're Santiago's proof that beauty and strength exist in the world, even when his daily reality is filled with struggle and disappointment. This is perhaps the most practical wisdom we can draw from this symbol. In our own lives, we need these lions, these recurring touchstones of joy and possibility that remind us that life is more than just our current circumstances. As we move deeper into Santiago's story, remember these lions. They're not just a beautiful literary device. They're a map for how we might maintain our own vitality and strength as we navigate the inevitable storms of life. They remind us that true power comes not from never experiencing defeat, but from never losing touch with the wild, joyful, unconquerable spirit that lives within us all. Picture this. You're sitting in your favorite coffee shop, and there's that one person everyone knows but nobody really understands. Maybe it's the elderly gentleman who comes in every morning, orders the same black coffee, sits at the corner table, and quietly observes the world. Some people whisper about his past, others shake their heads with pity, but there's something about him that draws your attention. That's exactly the dynamic we see playing out in Hemingway's small Cuban fishing village, where Santiago exists in this fascinating space between being completely integrated into the community and utterly isolated from it. Now, think about this for a moment. How does a community decide who belongs and who doesn't? In Santiago's case, the villagers have created this complex relationship with him that's both deeply personal and strangely distant. They know his routines, they've watched his decline, they've witnessed his struggles, yet they maintain this careful emotional distance that says everything about how we humans deal with failure and aging in our midst. The younger fishermen, those still flush with strength and regular catches, they look at Santiago with a mixture of respect and pity that's almost painful to witness. It's like watching someone regard a former champion athlete who's well past their prime. There's acknowledgement of what once was, but there's also this uncomfortable recognition of what time does to all of us. These fishermen have heard the stories of Santiago's legendary catches, his epic battles with Marlin that lasted days, his reputation as a master of his craft. Yet here he stands before them, 84 days without a fish, his boat looking worn, his equipment patched and repatched. But here's where it gets really interesting. The village doesn't simply dismiss Santiago. Instead, they've created this intricate social safety net around him, one that allows him to maintain his dignity while still receiving the help he desperately needs. Martin, the cafe owner, extends credit that everyone knows will never be fully repaid. The woman at the terrace brings him coffee and food, asking no questions about payment. Even the lottery ticket vendors include him in their daily rounds, understanding that hope sometimes matters more than the ability to actually purchase a ticket. Think about your own community for a moment. Do you have people like this? Individuals who exist on the periphery, supported by an unspoken understanding that we take care of our own, even when they can no longer fully take care of themselves. Hemingway is showing us something profound about human nature here. The villagers don't see Santiago as a burden exactly, but rather as a living reminder of the precarious nature of their own existence. The children in the village represent another layer of this complex relationship. Unlike the adults who view Santiago through the lens of economic productivity and social status, the children see him with uncomplicated affection and curiosity. They gather around when he tells stories. They ask him questions about fishing. They treat him not as a has-been, but as a repository of knowledge and experience. This generational divide is crucial because it shows us how differently we perceive value and worth. Consider Marlin, the boy who was once Santiago's apprentice. His parents have forbidden him from fishing with the old man, a decision that speaks volumes about how the community views Santiago's current situation. They're not being cruel exactly, but they're being practical in a way that cuts deep. They want their son to learn from successful fishermen, to be associated with prosperity rather than failure. Yet Marlin continues to care for Santiago, bringing him food, helping with his equipment, listening to his stories about baseball and the great Joe DiMaggio. This relationship between Marlin and Santiago becomes a mirror for how communities struggle with the tension between practical concerns and emotional loyalty. The parents represent the community's practical voice, the one that says resources are limited and must be allocated efficiently. Marlin represents the community's heart, the part that values relationships and history over immediate returns. Now here's something that resonates deeply in our modern world: the way the village talks about Santiago when he's not around. There's gossip, certainly, but it's not malicious gossip. It's more like collective concern mixed with frustration. People wonder if he should give up fishing, if someone should intervene, if his pride is preventing him from accepting the help he needs. Sound familiar? How often do we have these same conversations about people in our own lives who refuse to acknowledge their limitations or ask for help? The village's perception of Santiago also reveals something profound about how we measure human worth. In a fishing community, success is measured in pounds of fish, in the regularity of catches, in the ability to provide. By these metrics, Santiago has become worthless, a drain on resources rather than a contributor. Yet the community continues to support him, suggesting that beneath the practical considerations lies a deeper understanding of human value that transcends immediate productivity. What makes this dynamic so powerful is how Hemingway shows us that Santiago is aware of his position in the community. He knows he's pitied. He understands the whispered conversations. He feels the weight of being seen as unlucky. Yet he continues to participate in village life, continues to maintain his routines, continues to present himself each morning ready to fish. This isn't denial, it's defiance, and it's this quality that ultimately earns him a grudging respect from even his harshest critics. As we move deeper into Santiago's story, keep this community dynamic in mind. The village isn't just a backdrop for his adventure. It's the foundation that makes his journey possible, the safety net that allows him to take one more risk, one more chance at redemption. Welcome back to One Book, One Coffee, where we dive deep into the stories that shape us. I'm settling in with my morning brew, and I hope you've got yours too, because today we're exploring something profound from Hemingway's masterpiece. We've journeyed with Santiago through his epic battle with the Marlin, witnessed his triumph and heartbreak, and now we need to talk about what happens after the storm settles. What does Santiago's incredible journey actually leave behind? You know, there's something magical about how a single person's struggle can ripple outward, touching lives in ways they might never even realize. Santiago's 3-day odyssey on the Gulf Stream doesn't end when he drags his skiff back to shore with nothing but the skeleton of his great fish. In many ways, that's where the real story begins. Let's start with Marlin, the boy who loves Santiago like a grandfather. Picture this kid, probably around 14, watching his old mentor return battered and exhausted, his hands torn to ribbons, his face marked by sun and salt and something deeper. Now, think about this for a moment. What do you see when someone you care about has been through hell and somehow emerged with their dignity intact? The boy doesn't see failure when he looks at that fish skeleton. He sees something that changes him forever. Hemingway shows us Marlin's transformation in the most subtle ways. The boy who was forced by his parents to fish with luckier boats suddenly becomes a young man with unshakable loyalty. He brings Santiago coffee, tends to his wounds, and most importantly, he listens to the old man's story without judgment. But here's what's fascinating about legacy. It's not just what we pass down, it's what others choose to pick up and carry forward. In our modern world, we're obsessed with measurable success. We count followers, calculate profits, measure achievements in concrete terms. But Santiago's legacy to Marlin isn't a fishing technique or a secret spot where the big ones bite. It's something far more valuable and infinitely harder to quantify. It's the understanding that dignity doesn't depend on outcome, that courage isn't about winning, and that sometimes the most important battles are the ones nobody else will ever fully understand. Think about the mentors in your own life. Maybe it was a teacher who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself, or a coach who taught you that effort matters more than talent, or a grandparent who showed you how to face hardship with grace. The chances are, their most lasting impact on you wasn't what they achieved, but how they handled both success and failure. Santiago gives Marlin this same gift, a living example of what it means to endure with honor. But the ripples don't stop with the boy. The other fishermen, the ones who had written Santiago off as sallow, cursed with the worst kind of luck, suddenly see him differently. They measure the skeleton of his Marlin and realize they're in the presence of something extraordinary. Here's a man who hooked a fish larger than any of them had ever seen, fought it for 3 days, and brought it home despite losing everything to the sharks. Now, here's where Hemingway's genius really shines. The community's reaction isn't just about the size of the fish. It's about witnessing someone refuse to give up when giving up would have been completely understandable. In our age of instant gratification and quick fixes, Santiago's story reminds us that some things worth doing can't be rushed or easily achieved. His legacy becomes a kind of permission for others to attempt the impossible, to push beyond their perceived limitations. Consider how this plays out in modern contexts. Every startup founder who persists through rejection, every artist who keeps creating despite criticism, every person who chooses to care for an aging parent or fights through a difficult recovery, they're all channeling something of Santiago's spirit. His legacy isn't just literary, it's deeply practical. It's the understanding that meaning often comes not from what we accomplish, but from how fully we commit to the attempt. The beautiful irony of Santiago's story is that his greatest defeat becomes his most profound victory. The marlin he loses to the sharks transforms into something more valuable than any fish he could have brought to market. It becomes proof that an old man still has greatness in him, that experience and wisdom can triumph over youth and strength, at least in the ways that truly matter. But perhaps the most enduring aspect of Santiago's legacy is how it redefines what we mean by success. In a world that often measures worth by accumulation, money, possessions, achievements, Santiago's story suggests that true success might actually be about depletion. He gives everything he has, holds nothing back, and in doing so discovers reserves of strength and grace he didn't know he possessed. As we close this exploration of legacy, I want you to think about your own skeleton on the beach. What are you fighting for that others might not understand? What impossible fish are you chasing? And what would it mean to give everything you have to that pursuit, regardless of the outcome? Santiago's journey reminds us that the most profound legacies aren't always the ones we plan. Sometimes they emerge from our willingness to risk everything for something we believe in, to endure when endurance seems pointless, and to maintain our humanity even when the sharks circle. And that, my friend, is a lesson worth carrying forward, one sip of coffee and one day at a time. You know, there's something almost magical about the way Hemingway closes The Old Man and the Sea. We've just witnessed Santiago's epic battle, his devastating loss, and his painful journey home. You might think the story ends in defeat, but that's where Hemingway shows his true genius. As we settle into this final part of our coffee conversation, I want to talk about what might be the most beautiful aspect of this entire novella, how it transforms apparent failure into something luminous and eternal. Picture Santiago, exhausted beyond measure, finally reaching his shack. His great fish is nothing but bones now, picked clean by sharks during that agonizing journey home. Any reasonable person would call this a crushing defeat, but here's where Hemingway does something extraordinary. Instead of dwelling on what was lost, he shifts our focus to what endures. The old man sleeps, and in his sleep he dreams of lions. Not the sharks that destroyed his catch, not the pain in his hands, but lions playing on the beaches of Africa from his youth. Now think about this for a moment. Why lions? These aren't just random dream images. Lions represent something primal and magnificent, something that connects Santiago to his younger, stronger self. But more than that, they represent the part of him that cannot be diminished by failure or age. When we see him dreaming of lions, we're witnessing the human spirit's incredible ability to transcend physical defeat and find renewal in memory, hope, and the eternal aspects of our nature. This is where the story becomes deeply relevant to our modern lives. How many times have you faced what felt like complete failure? Maybe you poured everything into a business venture that collapsed, or spent years nurturing a relationship that ended, or dedicated yourself to a goal that slipped through your fingers at the last moment. In those moments, it's easy to focus on the bones of what we've lost, to let the sharks of regret and disappointment consume everything we fought for. But Hemingway is showing us a different way to understand these experiences. The old man's struggle with the great fish wasn't really about bringing home a trophy. It was about the confrontation itself, about proving to himself and the universe that he still had it in him to engage with life at its most demanding level. The fish may be gone, but the experience of that battle, the knowledge that he could still connect with something magnificent and wild, that becomes part of who he is forever. Consider the boy, Marlin, who appears again as the story closes. He finds the old man sleeping and sees the evidence of his ordeal, the torn hands, the exhausted body. But instead of pity, the boy feels something closer to reverence. He understands, perhaps better than anyone, what the old man has accomplished. This relationship between Santiago and the boy represents the way experience and wisdom pass from one generation to the next, not through lectures or advice, but through the simple act of witnessing courage and perseverance. There's a beautiful parallel here to the mentorship relationships we see in modern life. Think about the teachers, coaches, or colleagues who have influenced you most. Chances are, it wasn't because they never failed or always succeeded. It was because they showed you how to engage fully with life's challenges, how to maintain dignity in defeat, and how to find meaning in the struggle itself. The boy's loyalty to Santiago isn't based on the old man's ability to catch fish consistently. It's based on his recognition of something eternal and admirable in Santiago's character. The imagery of renewal runs throughout these closing scenes like an underground river. The old man sleeps deeply, his body recovering from the ordeal. Sleep itself becomes a form of resurrection, a daily miracle that allows us to wake refreshed and ready to engage with life again. How often do we take this for granted? Every night, we essentially die to the day, and every morning, we're reborn with new possibilities. Santiago's deep sleep after his ordeal is like a concentrated version of this daily miracle. And then there are those lions. They keep returning to Santiago's dreams, and they represent something profound about the human condition. We all carry within us images and memories that connect us to our most vital selves. Maybe for you it's not lions on an African beach, but the feeling of running as a child, or the first time you fell in love, or a moment when you felt completely alive and connected to the world around you. These internal touchstones don't diminish with age or failure. In fact, they often become more precious and powerful as we accumulate the experiences that help us understand their true value. The cycle of life that Hemingway presents isn't just biological, it's spiritual and emotional. Santiago has faced the depths, wrestled with forces beyond his control, and emerged not victorious in any conventional sense, but somehow enlarged by the experience. He's participated in the great drama of existence, and that participation itself is a form of triumph. Tomorrow, he'll wake up and consider going out again, because that's what it means to be alive, to be human, to refuse to let defeat have the final word. This is perhaps Hemingway's greatest gift to us in this story. He shows us that renewal isn't about erasing our struggles or pretending our defeats don't matter. It's about finding in those very struggles the seeds of something larger than ourselves, something that connects us to the eternal dance of effort and rest, loss and hope, that defines the human experience. In The Old Man and the Sea, Ernest Hemingway weaves a tale of determination, resilience, and the indomitable spirit of the human condition. Santiago, the old fisherman, embodies the struggle against the elements and the passage of time. His battle with the Marlin and the relentless ocean forces reflect deeper themes of pride, defeat, and the quest for personal redemption. Through his journey, we uncover profound truths about life and human nature. Here are some key takeaways from the book that can inspire and guide you. 1. Perseverance in the face of adversity. Santiago's relentless pursuit of the Marlin teaches us that persistence is essential, even when success seems impossible. Apply this by setting small, achievable goals each day to move steadily towards your larger dreams. Remember, persistence is an incremental journey. 2. Embrace the struggle. Life's challenges are not to be avoided but embraced. Santiago's acceptance of his battle with the Marlin teaches us to find meaning and personal growth in our struggles. Start by reframing challenges as opportunities to learn and grow. Be patient with yourself as you navigate these experiences. 3. The power of hope and faith. Despite his many failures, Santiago never loses hope. This eternal optimism fuels his determination. Cultivate your hope by focusing on what you can control and believing in the possibility of future successes. Keep a journal of daily victories, no matter how small. 4. Pride with humility. Santiago's pride is tempered with humility, understanding the sea's vastness and his place within it. Balance your ambitions with humility by recognizing and appreciating the contributions of others and the larger forces at play in your life. 5. Interdependence of all life. Santiago respects the Marlin and the sea, reminding us of our connection to nature and the world around us. Foster this awareness by spending time in nature, observing its beauty, and taking actions that contribute to environmental conservation. Start with small steps like recycling or reducing waste. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below with at least one idea from this book that stuck with you, one concept you're going to carry forward. It could be something that challenged your thinking, something you want to try, or even something you disagreed with. Your insight might be exactly what another listener needs to hear today. And if this summary gave you something valuable, a new perspective, a spark of motivation, or even just a peaceful hour with your coffee, share it with someone who might need it too. Subscribe to One Book, One Coffee, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new summary. Every week, we sit down together with one great book, one warm cup of coffee, and the simple belief that wisdom, shared well, can change lives. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and remember, every small step counts. See you at the next book.